podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to a new podcast, The Paddock and The Pavilion with Stephen Wallace. In each show, Stephen will interview someone connected to the world of horse racing or cricket.
Hello everyone. On today's podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Sue Redfern, the first female cricketer to have played and officiated at a Cricket World Cup. And in 2021, Sue became the first woman to officiate in an England men's home match as the fourth official against Sri Lanka at Cardiff. Welcome, Sue Redfern, MBE.
Thank you, Stephen. Great to be here. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you. And talking about the MBE, I wanted to ask you, what was that day like, and who was the person that presented you with your MBE?
Yeah, it was a very special day. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Had my close family and my partner with me, and it was Prince Charles, so Prince of Wales, presented me with the award.
That must be a very special day for you and for cricket.
Yeah, something that for 1 minute I never imagined that would be something that would certainly be in my career. I was very surprised when I actually received the letter informing me of the nomination. I honestly thought I was in trouble. It looked a very official letter and I thought I'd done something wrong. So when I opened it, I was a bit shocked, to be honest. So don't know who nominated me. Very, very honoured and very thankful. And yeah, it's very special. It's something that certainly I don't think I'll ever outweigh that. I feel very lucky to be awarded that.
Well, you've certainly had an incredibly varied cricketing career, and we've got lots to talk about. But how did it all start for you cricket-wise?
Yeah, I suppose like many people in cricket, there's a couple of routes in. For me, I had a cricket mad dad and a brother, an older brother, a couple of years older than me. And we were a very sporty family. So as a youngster growing up, played lots of different sports. My brother was very much into his cricket. And I suppose I just followed in his footsteps, really. And eventually at the age of 16, made the decision that cricket was going to be my main sport. It took off from there, really.
You say 16. It wasn't long after that you made your England debut in July 1995 against the Netherlands in Ireland.
That's right. So literally, I'd been playing for a women's cricket club since the age of 13, because when I was playing, there was really no girls' cricket. So adult cricket was really my route in. But I played junior England. I was selected for the full England team just after the 1993 World Cup win. So I joined. I was in the stands in 1993 for the World Cup at Lords, where I watched some of my county counterparts playing on the pitch, and then the following winter I was actually training alongside in an England training camp with some of those winners, who I was cheering for, just like everybody else in the stands that day, with some of my heroes on the pitch. So it was all a very surreal experience, Stephen. It was again, just felt very starstruck, if I'm being honest.
Well, I had to get this in, but your actual debut, Catherine Leng, who was been on this podcast a couple of times. Catherine was a guest in episode 56. She made her debut in that same game against Holland in Dublin.
Yep. So obviously similar age, and we represented England at a similar time. Catherine, obviously, very much a different style of bowler who could bat at that point. Played alongside Catherine for a good number of years. Good memories, Stephen.
I'm sure she'll like that. She does tune into some of the podcasts, so she's got to listen to this one now, hasn't she? But later that year, you then went to India and you played a couple of one-day internationals and also made your Test debut in a Test match where you actually won by 2 runs. What sort of experience was it like playing in India?
Yeah, it was obviously it was very young in my career. I was very young. I'd not been abroad without my parents. It was in those days because of the Test match cricket that was being played predominantly, it was more Test matches than ODIs. We were away for something like 7 weeks, I think. It's like an extended family being away on tour. The one thing that you have in common with your colleagues are that you all love cricket, but we're all very different individuals. In those days, we weren't professional cricketers. We were, we had some of of us had jobs, some of us had full-time jobs. I had casual jobs just to try and get some income. But whilst away on tour, I wasn't paid. So obviously it was a very different environment. But out there in India, for me, it was an absolute cultural shock because, I'd never been abroad. I'd never really been to anywhere other than Spain, I think. So, for me, it was a very different experience. Absolutely loved every minute of it. The experience, I think it shapes you, doesn't it, in terms of, kind of like putting you in an environment that's completely alien to you. And, you've got a job to do at the end of the day. You've got to perform. And, for me, obviously playing Test cricket, I love Test cricket. I'm a bit of a traditionalist, and it's a real test of your skills and abilities. And obviously the challenges of being in a very different country with very different food, with very different climate. It was definitely an experience, and hopefully it helped me progress my career.
I've got to ask, what was the travelling like in those days?
Yep, pretty sure everything was made to be a little bit more difficult than it could have been. So there were cancellations on flights, on trains. We'd be getting up first thing in the morning, and in Delhi there was no chance planes were going to take off first thing in the morning with the smoke and the fog. So basically, there'd been long delays at airports. I can remember on one of the journeys we had a 17-hour train journey, which wasn't the most comfortable. I don't think there were enough seats booked for us. So kind of like there was some challenges in logistics, certainly in that series.
And then the following winter, you were back there again playing for England in the World Cup.
Yep. Kind of like 2 years, massive difference. 95, very much kind of like we weren't self-funded. There was a lot of support which we got from grants to play, but when it came to 1997, I think what were the former ECB, I think it was the TCCB, had put some funding towards and some support towards us, and obviously with it being a World Cup, there were some different funding pots. So we went from interesting accommodation in 1995 into really nice hotels in 1997 with improved facilities. But again, there was quite a lot of travelling involved for the series, for the World Cup. We didn't quite get to the final. We lost against New Zealand in the semi-final. But yeah, again, a very different experience. Just brilliant to play in a global tournament. It was my first major experience of a major tournament in terms of the number of teams competing and knockout cricket, really. And
you were playing with all your heroes against the best people and the best players in the world.
Yeah, and in those days there were some really strong teams. South Africa was strong, New Zealand, Australia, India had a really strong team, and Ireland and the Netherlands were also kind of like relatively strong teams as well. So it was good cricket. There was some good cricket being played, I think, in those days.
And you played in 4 of the matches, and I know you mentioned the semi-final. You weren't in the semi-final, but I mentioned when I spoke to Catherine that England lost in that semi-final, a game we probably should have won.
Yeah, I think so. I think definitely we should have won that game. It's I think more strategic. I think probably some lessons learnt in terms of kind of like that game overall, really.
And your international career ended in 1999. You played 6 Test matches and 15 ODIs. You were still only 21. You must have hoped to have played more international cricket.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I would have liked to have continued. My fitness levels just weren't good enough. For me, it was, it would have been great to play more cricket, but I'm still very proud of what I achieved in those 5 years. But obviously, being a fast bowler, your fitness levels need to be right up there, and there were players who were much better than me, much fitter than me, who took over. So, it gave me the opportunity to go back into domestic cricket, and I really enjoyed. Actually, I actually stopped bowling and became a batter, and I wish I'd have done that a few years ago, Stephen. Earlier than what I did, to be honest.
Well, as you say, you carried on playing. You played for Derbyshire, I believe, between 1997 and 2001, and then you went on to play for Staffordshire until 2008.
Yep.
And then, how did you then decide to take up the role of an umpire?
Yeah, so I had some serious injuries in the 2000s, some of which put me out for a couple of seasons. And I think, by the time I got to 2000, I think it was 2010, 11, I'd kind of like stopped playing all forms of cricket, had a year off, went back and played one more year in 2012, and just wasn't enjoying playing the game anymore. It was something that, I think there comes a time for every individual where, kind of like there are other things you want to do. And I work in cricket, but I wanted to stay involved on a volunteer level. So I thought through what I wanted to do. I had my coaching badges and I was like, I'm not so keen on coaching. I've scored before. I used to score with my brother's team when I was much younger. That didn't really appeal, but my dad had been a cricket umpire, and it was something that I was like, well, you know what, give it a go, see what I think of it. So in the winter of 2013, in that January, I took my level 1 umpiring course with a local association, and I wasn't connected to a club. I was living in Birmingham, and I wasn't connected to a club, so I was linked in with the league, the men's league here, and did my first season umpiring, and it took off from there, really. So it was a good call on my part.
So what was your early progression then? You said you were umpiring in, is that the Birmingham League, I think?
I started in the Warwickshire Cricket League for the first year and then progressed to the Birmingham League, to which I still officiate in the Birmingham League now, which probably up until the last couple of years, probably around about 95% of my umpiring had been men's cricket, whereas now, because of time and because of where I am, I'm doing quite a lot of women's cricket now. Very different to where I started back in 2013.
Well, you very swiftly went through the ranks because you've been umpired now at the 2017 World Cup. You've umpired in the T20 World Cups in 2018 and 2020.
Yep. Yeah, I feel very lucky, very fortunate. The ICC, the International Cricket Council, placed me on their development panel of cricket umpires, which that happened in 2015-16, which gave me an opportunity to do some more umpiring and meet some international umpires from across the globe, male and female. It enabled me to umpire in international tournaments, both male and female. And, from my perspective, it gave me a great opportunity just to learn more about the trade. I think, every day you go out and umpire, you learn something new, either about the game yourself or how it's played. I certainly relish the opportunity to stand with different colleagues from different parts of the world to really improve my umpiring.
And what was it like in 2017 to be umpiring in the Women's World Cup in this country?
Yeah, amazing. To actually 20 years on from when I was a player, to be able to come back into a tournament and umpire in a World Cup, it was a great opportunity, and to see the growth of the game and to be part in home country was a very special moment for me.
And then this year you've umpired in your first Test match, the England and India match at Bristol, and then you were made the fourth official for the Sri Lanka T20 at Cardiff. That must have been a special moment.
Yeah, it was a bit of a whirlwind summer, really, and that 2-week, 3-week window there was particularly busy. Obviously, preparation for my first Test match. Obviously, multi-day cricket, very different in terms of how you umpire and the things around it. So quite nerve-wracking in terms of making my debut on that. It's been a long time since I've played Test cricket, and then to go straight from there straight into another environment, which obviously was a great opportunity and an important opportunity, really, in terms of showcasing that cricket can be a game for all, and it's important that we don't just see female umpires in the women's game. So for me, that was particularly important to showcase that females can be part of an international men's game. So, yeah, absolutely. Felt, again, very privileged. I keep saying it, but, I just feel very lucky and very privileged to be given the opportunity.
Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to ask you a few questions about umpiring in general now. When you were playing, were you a difficult player for the umpires? I mean, were you creating loads of rough with your left arm over?
Obviously I was a fast bowler, Stephen. Left arm fast bowler. I always thought, once I appealed, things were out, and I didn't quite get the decision. Maybe a few words spoken there in terms of what my opinions were on the decisions, perhaps.
It probably helps you dealing with players like that now. Then, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, for me, left arm over, kind of like DRS didn't exist, and reviewing LBWs kind of like are very different now. The introduction of DRS has proven that, different deliveries can elicit an LBW decision, whereas probably, there was more of a conservative approach when I was playing. So there were less LBWs given to a left arm over bowler to a right hander. So, kind of like I think, the game has moved forward, and, I think we can be, with the technology and with evaluating kind of like those decisions, we can be a little bit braver in terms of those decisions. So kind of like things have certainly moved on.
Yeah, talking about the DRS, I often wondered, there's so much data now in cricket. Do you get sort of reports on when you don't get a decision right on, and do you get training then, if an umpire is getting more wrong than right and things like that?
Yep. So all of my games this summer were pretty much video analysed with a match referee, a match manager. So all of my decisions were scrutinised. Most of my decisions were on video, which I have access to. So I'm able to look back on all of my decisions just like a player would analyse their involvement. I have mentors, I have coaches, I have colleagues I can turn to who I can share that video footage with, and just really talk through kind of like the reasons why I'd be given decisions, and why, potentially those decisions might, in future I might want to make different decisions. And it's just about looking at those. I tend not to look at individual decisions. I tend to look at if there's any trends of something. Because, I think at the end of the day, we've got milliseconds to see something, and it's, we try and train our eyes and put ourselves in the right position and the best position to be able to make the best decision, which is, it's about that concentration about what we're looking at and what we're looking for. But it's also about the preparation you do off the field in terms of the understanding and the interpretation of the laws and the regulations to enable you to make the best possible decision. So, absolutely. I reflect both, post game with colleagues and with match referees, match managers, and then on my own reflect. So there might be something that I'd be working over this. I'm currently in winter, so what am I working on over the winter to try and improve? What's been something that's come out of this season that I can improve on for next season? So
yeah, because we all sit at home thinking, oh, straight away we know it's out or not out, and it's a lot different when you're actually out there in the middle. I was going to ask you, what do you think of the sort of key qualities that an umpire requires?
Yes, obviously, we need to, we need to be absolutely knowledgeable on the laws and the regulations. There's no excuse for not knowing a regulation or a law. The players expect us to know that, and our decision making does need to be sound. We need to have processes in place that, enable us to kind of like try and make the best decision we can make on the information which we gather. But I suppose the key skill for me and the absolute priority for me is about the relationships, about how you work with the players, about how you communicate things and how you sell decisions, and the way in which you do that. You could have a really great decision, but actually if you sell it really badly, the outcome isn't so great. So it's all about those relationships, working with people, working with colleagues, working with players, with captains, to really make that game as enjoyable for everybody and as fair for everybody as possible. And that's certainly what I was looking for when I was a player. Captains and teams don't want any surprises. So if there is something that we can intervene in and share with captains and players before things get out of hand, obviously that's important. So that for me would be the key skill.
And how do you deal with criticism? I mean, I know you're on Twitter. Do you? Is it easy to blank out or?
Obviously, I think for me, I'm probably my hardest critic. I don't go out there deliberately looking to make errors or perceived errors. Much of the time, kind of like it's an opinion. I have an opinion as an umpire. I've got seconds to see a decision. I know I'm going to make errors sometimes, just like players make errors. And I think the key thing is, kind of like not to really get too hung up on that. I'd be disappointed if I keep making the same errors, because that suggests to me I'm not doing something right in my processes. But, everybody's entitled to opinions. Commentators have a job to do. People are entitled to their opinions, and obviously sport is quite a passionate game, as is every, kind of like every sport is passionate. So I understand the frustrations, when errors are made. Unfortunately, it's part of the game. But my view is that kind of like I've got to go out there and I'll try and make the best decision I possibly can and block out. And the key thing for me is if I have made an error in the game or a perceived error, is not to turn that into another one. So it's about dealing with yourself in terms of your resilience, being able to kind of like block that out and move on to the next decision and make a good decision the next time you're called upon.
And when you're a TV umpire, does that require different types of skills as well?
I think there's umpiring is about processes. So, kind of you set up, giving yourself as much space as you can to make the right decisions, having your eyes in the right place. And being a TV umpire is processes as well. And they're very different processes. And I suppose, the biggest thing about being a TV umpire, the pressure that actually, because you're able to record it, rewind and, request different footage, the perception is that you shouldn't be making errors, and I suppose that adds a little bit of pressure onto that. So kind of like, but again, communication, the communication with the director to ensure that you're getting the right footage. So you are seeing what you need to see. You're seeing the best available footage to make the best available decision is absolutely critical. And being able to do that in a pressure environment and being able to do it in a clear, articulate way so you can actually get to the decision is key, really. So the communication is pretty important there.
But you would encourage, if there's a young person thinking about umpiring, from what I'm hearing, you would encourage them to take up the role.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think if only, Stephen, I'd have taken a little bit more interest in the laws of cricket when I was a player.
Well, players think never do they? Yeah.
I couldn't possibly comment, but some players absolutely do know some of the laws, and I absolutely thoroughly believe that it can make you a better player. It can make you strategically a better player because you can utilize and understand the game a little bit more, and it can actually change the way in which you approach certain things. A good example of that is we see a lot of the time where if it's a leg by and there's been no shot offered, yeah, of course I'm going to call dead ball, but there's a law which says I don't call dead ball until the fielders have had the opportunity to run the team out if the team are running. So if the players knew that, rather than shouting at me saying there's no shot offered, they could be trying to run out the opposition, so it's just little small things like that the players could, take an advantage if they knew the laws a little bit more.
I wanted to move on to the 100. You umpired in the first game and the final. I was actually at the final and Fabulous. Saw a few games myself. We were lucky with the weather on the final day.
We were, yeah.
That was a massive boost to the women's game. Did you enjoy the 100?
It was quite possibly the most memorable 4 weeks I've had ever in cricket. There was trepidation going into the tournament in terms of a new format, not really knowing how that would look, how that would feel. Obviously, there was a lot of hype leading up to the tournament. There was a lot of pressure for that tournament to be a success. So when I was asked to, when I was appointed to do the first game, I can honestly say I've never been so nervous going into a cricket match because, you don't want to let anybody down. You want to make sure you do a good job. You want to make sure that kind of like the tournament starts off well. So, for me, there was a lot of pressure leading into that day. I had all day leading into it. It was a 6:30 start. Woke up, 9:30, sat there the whole day, just with my own thoughts. So yeah, it was quite nerve-wracking, and it was just brilliant. Just the whole thing for the women's game in particular. I umpired, officiated in the women's games. It was an emotional roller coaster for me because first of all, we saw some great cricket We saw some amazing tight games, which is always good for a competition. We saw some players who never really been noted before, to really make their names on the main stage. We saw players being selected from England as a result of that tournament. We saw some overseas players who aren't necessarily household names come over and make an impact in the tournament. For me, that first game, certainly all the way through the first and second innings up until the very last over, I was at square leg for the final 10 deliveries. I was at square leg for the final 10, and it was at that point I was able just to look around the crowd and listen to the crowd. It was a tight finish. Danny van der Kerk batted unbelievably well to win that game. I don't think Oval Invincible shouldn't have really won that game. I think Manchester Original should have. That was where the game was going. Kind of like it looked as if Manchester Originals would get over the line, and the opportunity to just listen around that stadium and stand in the middle and listen to the crowd cheering for a game of women's cricket was something I could never have foreseen when I was playing for cricket for England in the 1990s. So credit where credit is due to all of the people that stuck by that 100, and the opportunity and what that has meant for the women's game is just mind blowing, really, in terms of incredible and just really exciting, Stephen, in terms of that.
Well, I'd agree with you there with the double headers.
Yeah.
The crowd for the women's final, I think was it 17,000 or something. Coverage on BBC television as well, and it really showcased the women's game.
For sure. And, the biggest credit to the players, really, because, they made it that environment and they worked really hard over those 4 weeks. It was quite an intensive 4 weeks in difficult times with obviously some COVID restrictions. There was a lot of testing still. There was a lot of requirement to ensure that we remain safe to protect the tournament. So it was just an incredible 4 weeks. And like you say, that the morning of the final, in the lead up for the 48 hours before that final, the weather forecast was just atrocious. And I don't think anybody really expected any cricket on that day because there was a severe forecast for rain. And, you wake up, and I certainly undrew my curtain in London that morning, and, it was absolutely hissing it down. You just think, oh, crikey, this is going to be such a hard day. And, fortunately, the cricket gods were with us, weren't they?
They were. I wondered what you were going to do, whether you were going to restrict both games to 50 ball games or whatever, because I couldn't see how you were going to get both games in on the day.
So, fortunately, there's a cricket committee that decide on major match days. So, as umpires, we just provide information on readiness for play, and then it's down to the cricket committee to decide how they're going to branch that out. But fortunately, we didn't have to call upon them because we started on time, which was, it was a very last minute decision to go on time. And we stayed on for a bit of rain. But after that, there was no rain. So we were really lucky.
And where do you see the women's game going in the next few years after we just had a World Cup final T20 where there was 86,000 people at the MCG?
Yeah, so obviously that was so disappointing. I was over in Australia for that tournament. I was officiating in the group stages, and I stayed on to watch the final, and I was in the stadium on that. And that was just literally before COVID hit. And the buzz around that game, obviously for the global game, seeing that audience, seeing, India playing Australia in that final was so exciting. And we thought the momentum was really there and we were going to build on it. And then COVID hit, which was really kind of like worrying for the women's game. And I think there are still pockets of, worry for me, concern for me personally that, there are some countries that, aren't as fortunate as some other countries in terms of, we need to get cricket being played more in other countries to ensure that kind of like the game continues globally. And I think, COVID put a bit of a stop on that. And we're still impacted today in terms of what's happening. But, fundamentally, I think, the future does look bright. I think it's being proven that, if you put the games on, if you allow the opportunity for them to be aired, that people will come and watch. And I think that was something in the 100 that people were coming through the gates to watch the women's game, not just the men's game. And I think that's really important. and the makeup of that wasn't just, male. It was a mixture. It was family, and that's really exciting. We've seen a transition between kind of like the number of girls who are now want to play cricket, in some programs, recreational programs, which are really important. And I think what's absolutely key is we continue to build on that, and we continue to kind of like show that exposure, show that visibility. Increasing the number of professional female cricketers is really important, and that's something that needs to happen not just within England. It needs to happen globally as well. And hopefully the future is very bright. That you can honestly say cricket is a game for me as a female. You can see a career opportunity, and you can see that there's potential there in that pathway. So that's really important.
And you've got the Commonwealth Games in 2022 as well, which features cricket.
Yep, and again, that's just women's cricket T20. Obviously, a different makeup of teams that qualify for that because of the Commonwealth. So you're getting teams such as the West Indies don't compete as a overall team. It's a specific country that have qualified. And I think also as well, look, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, isn't it, for the England players to play in a Commonwealth Games on their home soil. So I think that's a really exciting time, which hopefully the England Wales Cricket Board can take full advantage of in terms of kind of like really growing the game and promoting the game, not just in England, but specifically in the West Midlands and in Birmingham as well. That would be really exciting.
And women's umpiring, surely there's no reason why the likes of yourself couldn't be umpiring a men's test match.
Yeah, I think what's really important is, kind of like there needs to be visibility of more female officials. And I think in the 100, Stephen, kind of like 3 other female umpires were on field and had DRS experience, which they've not had before. So it's ever increasing. In the women's domestic professional competition, there were 10 female umpires, including myself, in that tournament. And I think that's really important to have that visibility, to have more female umpires exposed to the professional game. I think what's really important is moving forward, just like players and just like coaches, people see it as a genuine career opportunity and a genuine career challenge, really. And I think ultimately, in my opinion, cricket umpiring isn't gender based. It shouldn't be gender based. There's no reason why males or females shouldn't be umpiring men's or women's cricket. Reverse, really. It's about the skill sets. There are some slight differences between the men's and women's game, but it's about skill sets of the umpires to fit into the relevant games. But, in my opinion, absolutely, there's no reason why a female shouldn't be umpiring, and other countries, some countries are already have females in their professional men's game. So somebody like Kim Cotton, who umpired the final in New Zealand, she umpired, the Women's World Cup final in Australia, but in New Zealand, her home country, she's now on their first class panel. So, an umpire in men's cricket, I think she did a bit of the Super Smash over the weekend. So it's there, but the visibility of more female umpires is really important, and to see it as a career opportunity.
And finally, we're coming up to both the England and the women's Ashes in Australia. What's your thoughts on the 2 series?
The men's and the women's series, I mean, obviously, everybody wants to play. Well, as a player myself, you want to play in an Ashes challenge. You want to pitch yourself up against the Australians. From a men's and women's perspective, there are pros and cons for each team, aren't there? In terms of I think it's finely balanced. I think certainly, kind of like one of the advantages is obviously Australia will have a home advantage for the women. They've just come out of the Women's Big Bash. The final was at the weekend, so there's opportunity there for those players to work on some areas of their game and get themselves into some form leading into the tournament. Whereas obviously the England women, we're currently sitting here with snow on the ground, so very different in terms of preparation. So obviously that would be a bit of a home advantage. I think it's great personally that there's a test match involved for the women as well as multi-day. So you've got T20, you've got ODIs, you've got a test match as well. So I think, having that opportunity, and also as well for the women, it's a great opportunity that the England women's A team are also touring at the same time and playing in a series. So there's real great opportunity, which obviously is leading into the Women's World Cup in New Zealand in March and April. So exciting times certainly for the England women, and for the men's, obviously, an Ashes challenge is always a challenge.
Do you think it's going to be tough for both teams?
I mean, Australia, if you look at Australia for the women, if you look at their win record, they're an incredibly great team with a depth as well. So, from that perspective, England are certainly up against the best in the world.
And what does the winter bring for yourself?
Yep. So I work full time. So I'm now back working full time. I did a lot of cricket over the summer. So for me, it's just about, first of all, my full time job, which I'm fortunate enough to be working in cricket in a different area. So I'm back working full time. But also as well, as a volunteer, I help and support new umpires through my local association. So I do some tutoring of new umpires. And there'll be some fitness in there, Stephen. There'll be some golf if my golf course reopens, if it stops snowing at some point. So it's pretty much catching back up with family and friends, work and golf, and just preparation for next year at this point.
So are you still working for the ECB then in your professional capacity? Yeah.
Yep. So I work for the England and Wales Cricket Board as a regional facilities manager. So I support the recreational game in the north of England, and I help and support clubs with grants and facility improvements. So, yeah.
And what's your golf handicap then?
I'm pretty proud that I've managed to hold on to my 14 handicap. So considering I don't play much in the summer, I'm pretty proud of that.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on the Paddock and Pavilion. You've certainly seen some quite dramatic changes in your cricketing career. I mean, when you first started playing, women must have been playing in skirts rather than trousers, and now you're seeing women officiating in top level men's cricket, and your own particular career going from a 17-year-old playing for England to now being the fourth official in an England men's international.
Yeah, I have to pinch myself, and certainly along the way, there's been points, certainly in the women's game, that have been, kind of like real points which have made a big difference. And I think, that skirts to trousers, there was a lot of controversy when that happened. There was a lot of pros and cons for it. I think moving into coloured kit as well, rather than just whites, is really important. There's been a lot of trigger points through the years that's really kind of like made the game what it is today. And I think, offering, I think back in 2014, full professional contracts for the women was a real landmark moment.
Well, thank you again for joining me on the Paddock and the Pavilion.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Paddock and the Pavilion. You can download the show on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Stitcher and Spotify. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook and now on Instagram at the Pad and Pav. Don't forget, if you like the show, please do leave us a rating and review.
Sports Social Podcast Network.